One is these comments by Dr. Fauci over the weekend suggesting that we're all going to be wearing masks irrespective of whether we've been vaccinated or not into 2022. Do you agree with that?
I don't think so. I think that there might be circumstances where some of us will want to wear masks. I don't think this is going to be linear, too. Dr. Fauci also said that he thinks things will be normal by December. I think things will be normal in the spring and the summer of this year. I think in the fall, we're going to have to take certain precautions, but we're going to be back doing stuff. And then as we get into the deep winter, as this starts to circulate again, I think come December, we may start to pull back. That doesn't mean we're going to have shutdowns and be doing what we did this December. But, it means we might not have holiday parties. Board meetings in December might be Zoom rather than in-person meetings. There's going to be things that we do differently. So this isn't going to be a linear progression over the course of the year where it gets progressively better. And then by Christmas time, it's all good. I think this is a respiratory pathogen that circulates in the wintertime. And once it becomes wintertime again in 2021, 2022, we're going to need to take certain precautions. I think if there's going to be a normal time over the next 12 months, it's likely to be this spring and summer.
That spring lines up with what got a lot of play over the weekend, Scott, and that's the gentleman from I think, Johns Hopkins, who pointed out he did some estimates, and I don't know how accurate you feel that these are, but that the number of cases that just have happened and people have recovered could be 6.5 times the number of cases reported. You do that math and you get up to something like 50% or above herd immunity. You add the 15% of people who've gotten one shot. I want to ask you about that, too, because there's the article that maybe one shot gives you pretty good immunity. But if you add 50 or 55 plus 15, they're saying that maybe April, this is much quieter in terms of transmission and hospitalizations than we're assuming, and that we could be nearing herd immunity already. You think those numbers are too high that that doctor was estimating?
Yeah, I mean, he's a good physician. I'm not sure I necessarily agree with those numbers, but I think the sentiment's right. I suspect that we're diagnosing over the course of this about 1 in 4 infections. About 120 million Americans have had this, and you start layering on the additional Americans we're vaccinating, and it's at least 10% a month. We probably have more than 40% of the American population with some form of protective immunity right now. If you look at the data on New York and New Jersey of counties that had 45% or more seroprevalence going into the winter surge, they didn't have much of a winter surge if you actually screen based on that. So when you're getting to 40 to 50% of the population with some form of protective immunity, you don't have herd immunity, but you have enough immunity in the population that this just doesn't transfer as readily. So I do think as we get into the warm weather, as we vaccinate more of the population, and in view of the fact that at least a third of Americans have had this, I do think that, infection levels are going to come down dramatically over the course of the spring and the summer. B117 probably is going to mean prevalence is a little bit higher in certain parts of the country than it otherwise would have been, but I don't think it changes the overall trajectory. In the UK, B117 started to really take off in a linear fashion once it got to 20% overall prevalence. I'm not sure it's going to easily get to 20% overall prevalence in a short period of time here, because if you look at states where it's prevalent right now, like Florida, they probably have already 50% seroprevalence going into this wave. So a lot of people have already had it.
Hey, Dr. Gottlieb, I think this is really important. I'm really glad to hear you say that he's a good physician. I spoke with him yesterday, Dr. Marty Makary, and we've had him on the show in the past. He's a contributor at another network now, so he can't come on with us right now. But I did talk to him, and he laid out some of these things. The one thing he said is that the phrase that he wrote that's getting picked up so much that it's going to be mostly gone by April. He wishes that maybe he could have reworded that. But I think he lines up pretty clearly with what you've been saying on a lot of these things, that come spring, come summer, we're going to be at a much more normalized pace. And the biggest point he pointed out was this idea that we are looking at underreporting of these cases, and we're looking at underreporting and then kind of going to studies that have shown based on the antibody tests. He thinks that those are underreporting things, too, because the antibodies go up, but you still have the T cells. And so his guesswork on all of this is kind of based on the idea that even the antibody counts undercount it by about half. It's not a crazy sentiment.
No, and the modeling shows we're probably diagnosing 1 in 4, maybe 1 in 5 when you talk to certain people, certain modelers who are estimating a little bit higher. But about a third of the American public has had this infection. I think the only caution here, and Dr. Fauci was on TV as well, talking about December being normal. I just don't think it's going to be a linear progression here. I think that we're going to have a period where it's going to be normal. And I think it's going to be like Woodstock in America. I think people are going to be going out and doing a lot of stuff this summer, a lot of pent-up demand for consumer spending. And then as you get into the fall, I think we're going to be taking certain precautions. If grade school kids go back to school but aren't vaccinated, which I don't think they will be, maybe you see potting and masks in grade schools. But then as we get into the deep winter, remember, this is a coronavirus that circulates in the wintertime. It's going to start to circulate again, and you're going to see people start to take precautions. Businesses start to take more precautions. So it's not going to be a linear progression. This is a transition year. We're transitioning from a pandemic phase into a seasonal phase with this virus, but it's not going to be binary. We're going to have to take certain precautions, I think, as we get into the winter of 2021, 2022.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.